Hi, Chris Duff over at Serious Land Capital, Vacant Land Funding Partner. Continuing with our Subdivide series here. This time we're going to dive a little bit into major subdivides. That's a really complex topic deserving of its entire own series, but I wanted to touch on a few points. If you've missed some of the early parts of the series, we initially had discussed what type of margin we look for on subdivide deals, roughly 2x, preferred diligence periods, things that we like to have sent over to us when you're submitting a deal, general funding requirements, dispo, timeline targets. So now we will touch on major subdivides. So something that we built into Land Pricer, and because major subdivides, again, has so much complexity here, is really trying to figure out, are there any nearby major subdivides that might have successfully been developed in a relatively nearby area? I don't know, say radius of a mile, maybe a little bit less, depending on how developed the area is. What I do know for certain is that you wouldn't want to be a first mover when it comes to major subdivides, even from like the larger home builders out there. Like D.R. Horton is kind of the only one, they're the largest home builder in the country, and they're kind of known for leading the way. Pretty aggressive negotiators, to say the least, from people that I know who've had dealings with them. So, other, even large public traded builders don't necessarily have the financing to just trailblaze into an area to build out in a completely kind of undeveloped area from a major subdivide perspective. You might be able to find some local builders as well there, so it's possible you might be able to develop the right connections. But usually if we're going to be considering possible major subdivide play, thinking from a national home builder perspective is usually going to be preferred, unless, again, you have some type of connections you might be able to leverage in the area from a builder side. So most national home builders will not consider anything below roughly 50 home sites. I take that as again, not precise guideline. Different areas of the country can be unique, and some home builders will have their own cutoffs. So, but that's just kind of a general guideline to consider. Whatever parcel that you're looking at, you want to make sure you could, chop it up into at least 50 parcels, preferably more when possible, and kind of just try to match it up to another major subdivision within the area and make sure like the contour is relatively similar. You don't have key terrain issues, wetlands, or trickier, elevations, or dips in the property that can make the cost to build much more significant for a builder. So you want to account for all of that and, kind of decrease some of the acreage from your consideration from a building perspective if there are some of those concerns. But, if you can find that there has been a major subdivide in the area that's like relatively the same total acreage size, that's definitely a good sign. Though you'd also want to check, when was that major subdivide done? So usually if I see something in the area, I'm going to click on one of those properties that was presumably already improved upon. And you really want to ensure, okay, you're looking at other major subdivides here. A bad sign is that there's, very minimal improvements, like sub 20% of all lots have been built on. There were probably some regulatory issues, utility cost overruns, or tricky aspects of the market that just made it much more difficult for that subdivision to really get fully developed. Now, if it's like brand new, you have to weigh that a little bit more, but then you're going to be running into some saturation risks. Usually from like a land investor perspective, you're not, expecting to do the full horizontal vertical build out. It's just understanding, okay, what might be a good option, whether it's just the raw land by itself or, getting it through entitlements and into a paper lot setup to sell to a developer / builder. And so if there's been some difficulties in the market locally, especially in their relatively same neighborhood, that's going to make it on average less attractive to a builder. But, it's kind of fully improved or in that direction, all the better. But usually when I'm checking in on this, click on one of those improved lots and see when was that home built. Sometimes homes look a lot newer than they actually are when you click on some of these. If they were built in the 1980s, 1990s, all of a sudden you're considering, okay, yeah, there was a major subdivide here. People are still living here, but this was all developed 30 or 40 years ago. Is there still actually demand from a builder perspective and just an end buyer perspective to even move in here? Or would there already have been additional build activity within the last few decades? The more recent the builds in a kind of actively developed or improved upon major subdivide, the better, because then you have a better idea that, okay, this is more recent demand. The builder demand is probably going to be higher as well. So that's something to consider. I'd say, if there was a major subdivide done and most of the homes were built within the last 15 to 20 years, probably in better shape to consider. So that's something else that I would be on the lookout for if I'm first starting to consider the possibility of a major subdivide. And what's the street access? Do I know what the utilities look like? Initially you could make a couple calls. Okay, what's, again, we kind of discussed this in a previous podcast. What's the capacity for public utilities to be brought to this area? Do I need to, do you need to extend sewer lines, water lines, etc.? Like how easy and simple is it, and cost effective is it going to be for a builder to actually extend anything over to the area? How close is it to a highway? I forget. There's some general guidelines you can use Perplexity or Google for some of these, but usually it's like 2 turns or something to a high, or like 2 streets to a highway or something is going to be more favorable for builders to look at. Is it within like a more quality school system or school district rather? How close is it to emergency services? Those are additional considerations, and just like generally city centers too. Those are going to be your guidelines. Again, every area is a little bit different, and you can search on the internet for a couple of those key guidelines there. But yeah, the closer you are to a metro or city center, usually you're going to be in better shape. And pay attention to where you are in relation to highways, particularly interstates, or at the very least state routes or US routes. So those would be some initial guidelines there. The actual setup of how you might get in contact with builders and trying to kind of reverse engineer the pricing, that's going to be its whole other conversation. Generally, if we're looking at like a major subdivide, I'd want to try to get the property under an option contract, so then you're de-risking, and I've talked about this prior, de-risk a lot of your involvement in the deal, decrease capital expenses. Maybe you have to pay for some entitlements. I believe you get a builder to cover it, and even getting in contact with the builder is its own hurdles there too. So but those would be additional steps to start to consider. But when you're initially just assessing the market, hey, do you think this is even worth diving into from a major subdivide perspective? Try to sell the paper lots, and maybe you can find some additional comps that happen, sold on the market, or are active on the market, ones that are trying to sell from like a paper lot perspective. Occasionally you'll see that on the MLS, so you can see whether there's any real activity there anyway. A lot of times these paper lot type situations will happen off market, but not always, especially if there's more local developer or builder activity for possibly a little bit smaller subdivides there. So that's just something to consider. If you have something that might be less than 50 lots, it could be, I'd probably stray away unless you see there's an active market for paper lots on the MLS or other listing platforms. So food for thought from that side. Obviously a complex topic, but hopefully starts to shed some light here. SeriousLand.capital for any of your funding needs for land deals. Check out Land Daily Diligence for zero cost review of your land deals. And landpricer.ai for the most simple and easy way to price land. Hope you subscribe and share. Looking forward to next time. Take care. Bye.